Library. Today we are doing story time plus what I've read in the first half of middle grade March. So, story time first. I apologize for not getting a video out for a while, but I do have some pretty good reasons. Last weekend was Nationals for ballroom dance, and I have some nieces and nephews who competed at that. So when I wasn't at work, I was pretty heavily involved with that, especially last weekend. And then they leave, and what do I know? But I seem to have caught a cold. So I've been getting over that this week, which is why I didn't put up a video sooner. I'm doing much better. Not sure my voice is quite normal. Apologize if that is the case, but we are back now, and I am excited to talk about what I have been reading so far. So, let us begin. So, for the book that is older than me, I decided to read Lynettes and Valerians. And as it says here on the cover, running away has never been so fun. This is by Elizabeth Gooch. And yes, this is exactly what happened. The Lynette children, there are four of them, plus their dog, and their mother has died, I think, fairly recently, and their father is in the army, so they have been left with their grandmother. Not a happy situation for any of them. The children are too noisy and too messy and too wild for the grandmother's taste, and the grandmother is too strict and formal for the children's taste. And so the children run off, and call it fate or what you will, but they run away and end up at their Uncle Ambrose's house, who they've never seen. I guess he is the one son who hasn't kept in contact with his mother, not being very fond of her. He's their father's eldest brother, I believe. Anyway, he is a scholar. He was, I think, at Oxford. Anyway, he is the parish priest now, and he likes to spend his time studying. He's also been a master of a boys' school, and he has theories about education. So, as annoyed as he is to have his scholarship interrupted, he agrees to take the four children into his home, which is just as well, makes them it's a better arrangement all around. But there are mysteries surrounding the village where Uncle Ambrose lives, and especially about uh, Lady Alicia, whose family is the most prominent in the area. She is the last one there. Uh, Her husband was into archaeology, went to Egypt and never came back, and her son was lost on a misty day out in the hills, and so there's mystery all around that, and some mysterious people in the village. And of course, the Lynette children, well, who better to figure out all these mysteries than them? Classic Elizabeth Gooch children. I absolutely fell in love with this book. Highly, highly recommend it if you're looking for a gentle story with a bit of magic and a bit of adventure. So that was the first book I finished in March. I then went on to The Extremely Inconvenient Adventures of Bronte Middlestone by Jacqueline Moriarty. So, Bronte Middlestone, she has lived with her aunt and her butler as long as she can remember. She was told her aunt found her in the lobby of the place where she lives. Or maybe she was just visiting there. That might make a bit more sense. But anyway, in the lobby, in her baby carriage, basically, with a note saying her name and leaving her for her aunt with a packet of tea. Well, even though this is a bit of an interesting start to life, Bronte's been happy enough. But when she is 10 years old, a telegram arrives saying that her parents, who she hasn't seen since that day when she was a baby, were killed by pirates. And so their will goes into effect. And their will says Bronte has to travel to each of her other 10 aunts and visit them for at least 3 days each and deliver a gift. And she has to do this all by herself. And to enforce all of this, the will has been edged in some sort of fairy thread. So Bronte has to do this, or basically her hometown will be destroyed. Most inconvenient, but it's not all bad. Most of Bronte's aunts are and their families are quite nice, and she has adventures, and maybe she ends up figuring out a bit more about her parents and what happened to them. So let's see. After that, for book group, I read a book that's been going around BookTube recently, and that is Dear Mrs. Bird. Oh, I forget who the author is, but Dear Mrs. Bird, it is about a young lady in World War II London. This is right in the middle of the Blitz. It might be 1940. I'd have to look it up again to see the exact date, but you get the idea. Now, this young lady, uh, she has a job with a secretary at a financial, or maybe I think it's a legal firm, and she also volunteers as a call operator uh, 3 evenings a week at a place people can call in telling where damage has been done and fires started and etc. and so forth from bombings primarily. But what she really wants to be is a war correspondent. So when she sees an ad in the paper looking for an assistant at a newspaper, well, she is very excited and applies and gets it. Little does she know, though, that this isn't a big newspaper. This is actually a ladies' journal. And she's primarily working for the lady, Mrs. Bird, who writes answers to the advice column for people sending questions, and then she'll respond. And worse still, Mrs. Bird is a difficult personality, and she has a whole list of things she will not talk about. And so our intrepid young lady decides she will answer some of them. And you can imagine what happens with this. There's also the facts of living during the Blitz. Her friend, who she's living with, who came to London with her from their small town, she's gets engaged, and things happen with that too. It's a very interesting book. Great look at the Blitz as far as that goes. And I am of two minds. On the one hand, our heroine really should not have been answering these letters to the editor. That is, eh, she doesn't really have the authority to do that. On the other hand, Mrs. Bird, I think, is completely wrong in being so extremely limited in what she will answer. I mean, sometimes it's a struggle just to find enough questions that she will say something to even fill up her allotted column space. And even when she answers, most of the time what she says is very brusque and, well, it's your fault anyway. If it's not, keep a stiff upper lip and all that. In most cases, not helpful at all. So I'm not unsympathetic to our heroine wanting to respond in a more humane way to these letters, if they were even being responded to at all. So, yeah. Very enjoyable bit to think about, so glad I read it. Great World War II story. And let's see, next I read Winter House. So Elizabeth, she lives with her aunt and uncle. She's lived with them pretty much as she can remember since 4 years old. Apparently her parents were in some sort of accident. And her life is not happy. They are poor, but that wouldn't matter if her aunt and uncle were nice to her. But they're not. They complain about everything. They yell at her about everything. All they want to do is sit in front of the TV, especially her aunt. Well, her uncle does too, but he's more likely to fall asleep. And so Elizabeth spends most of her time at home in her room with her books. She's very smart. She loves word games. And she comes home for the last day of school before Christmas break, and the house is locked, and there's a bag with a few of her clothes and necessaries in it, with a note from her aunt and uncle saying they are going on vacation for Christmas, and she's being sent to the Winter House Hotel for 3 weeks for Christmas, whether she wants to or not, which they said they were doing earlier, but Elizabeth had begged them not to. But there you go. Oh, and they give her like $3 plus the ticket to get her to Winter House. But this actually ends up being a wonderful thing for Elizabeth because the Winter House is a most marvelous place. Best place she's ever been in. And she actually makes a friend, a boy about her age named Freddie, who's very inventive and also loves word games. So all is going well, except there are mysteries about Winter House. And there's this couple there who are acting quite oddly. And, well, you have to read the rest to know what happens, but quite the adventure. Didn't like this as much as the Inconvenient Adventures of Bronte and Middlestone, but still quite enjoyable enough for me to continue. Glad I read it. And let's see. Oh, yes. I took one day and I read 3 graphic novels, perfect for middle graders. What can I say? So, first we have Baron, the Cat Returns by Aoi Hiragai. So this is the original manga that the Studio Ghibli film The Cat Returns is based on. And, well, obviously it's been translated into English in this version, but very fun. This is a story any kid would enjoy. Not the best art I've ever seen for manga, but still very good. And to be fair, my standards for art includes the like of Clamp. which is extremely high. So very fun story, very fun to remember all of this. And now I don't have to watch the movie to enjoy the story. So the story follows Haru, a typical, she's probably in early middle school, I think. But typical schoolgirl. She rescues a cat one day, and because of that, well, little did she know that the cat was the son of the king of cats. And so they do all sorts of things to thank her, including driving her off to the land of cats. Fortunately, she's enlisted the help of the Baron, and he is going to help her with a little bit of help from some friends. So, very fun. Perfect for cat lovers. Okay. I also read Tide Song by Wendy Zhu. And this story is about Sophie. Sophie has magic and she's wanting to enter into the magical academy. And so she is sent off to her aunt's house to study magic with her aunt and cousin to get ready for that. And she has plenty of adventures. Her aunt at first is a bit difficult. Her cousin's a bit easier, but she still has trouble with the magic. And that trouble ends up causing issues and specifically entangling her magic with the magic of a young water dragon named Lear, and things go on from there. Very fun. This one's in color. Great story. Quite enjoyed it. And yes, there's definitely some touching on Chinese mythology in this, which is perfect. Then I read Wolfwalkers, the graphic novel. So this was adapted by Sam Satin, and it's based on the film by it's the same company that did Song of the Sea, Secret of Kells, things like that. And I got this specifically because even though this has been out for over a year, the movie is having extremely limited distribution, which is a bit discouraging. So, but they have a graphic novel of this, and that's great. So, this is during the time of the Lord Protector Cromwell. So Robin Goodfellow and her father moved to Ireland, and their job is to, well, her father's job at least, is to hunt wolves, make it safe for civilization. Little do they know that the legends about wolfwalkers are true, and Robin sneaks out, gets into trouble, and is saved by Neb, who is a wild girl and a wolfwalker, and their destinies intertwine to, well, we'll just say to save the day in a general sort of way. Oh, so these are probably taken from the actual movie, these images, also in color, so very fun. An interesting take on A point of Irish history. Uh, so, yeah, and I like the tagline when friendship conquers fear because Robin and Meb, they come from two very different worlds and yet manage to become the best of friends, which is wonderful. Hmm. Let's see, there's one last item that I have read so far this month. Um, ooh, but I did not do that before the end of the first half of the month. That's the second half, so I'll have to save that for my wrap-up video for March. Stay tuned. Yes, I have already finished one more item since the first half of the month has ended. It's been a good reading month. I love middle grade March. It's wonderful to have an excuse to read so many wonderful middle grade books. So, I think that's everything that I have so far. Thank you so much for joining me at Cindy's Library. Really do appreciate it. Feel free to let me know any comments. Love to hear what you've been reading for middle grade March. And until next time, I hope we all stay safe and healthy. And as always, happy reading!